Reconsider Christ podcast provides real-life examples on how Christ works to interact with our lives. Our guests paint on the canvas of life their stories of joy, heartache, struggle, and victory. You will learn more about the true nature of Christ, for it is time to reconsider Christ. Emma's career spans several continents, international companies, to representing a defense contractor in a suit from the Justice Department. This businesswoman, wife, and mother has been shot at by the Taliban in Afghanistan, endured the discrimination of Arab cultures, literally worked around the globe, and talks today about her struggle of building an enduring relationship with Christ. Emma will guide us to the moment right after her divorce, where she finds herself in an airplane at 40,000 feet with two suitcases, all alone, heading to Sydney to start a prestigious position. In that plane, Emma tells God she is ready for him to go to work on her and develop her into the person he wants. Emma's story will encourage you to build a bold relationship with Christ where you can live confidently that the struggles and victories continue to shape you into the best you. Good morning, Emma.
Good morning, Gene. Great to meet you.
It's great to be with you today. So glad to have you on the podcast. I'm very excited about the things you have to share from the previous conversations that we've had. And, to me, one of the overriding themes is when people look at your career, they go, oh my goodness, what a career, England and Dubai and Australia and Asia. And for some reason, you came to the United States after that. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it's just people look at others and say, man, I wish I was in their shoes. But as you and I know, and as these podcasts have shown, when you start stripping back the layers of the onion, you realize that we all have challenges. We all suffer in various ways. And, life is not just up and to the right all the time, as our career might say. So, and as you and I discuss, I can't imagine going through the things that we go through without Christ. And I know you have a great story today to tell us about, a great career, the ups and downs of life, and how Christ has become more and more meaningful to you throughout the years. So thank you again for being with us.
It's my pleasure. It's a real honor. Thank you.
Well, in these podcasts, what we like to do is just start with early on, So what were your first memories and feelings and experience with Christ?
Sure. So I can't remember a time when God wasn't part of our life. We were raised in a pretty legalistic, religious background, very conservative. And so growing up, God was really all about punishment. He was there with a big stick to catch us out if we did the wrong thing or said the wrong thing or thought the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of guilt and shame. I think that sense of, not only if you did something wrong where you're going to be punished, but you should feel bad about that forever, quite frankly, forever. That it's very important to understand how bad you are. And so I grew up knowing that God was really this big, angry monster, just waiting to catch you doing something wrong so he could enjoy punishing you. And it was very important to make sure that you spent every moment of every day worrying about getting life right, absolutely right.
So, you're a child, and this cannot be making sense. And I'm sure there was a lot of tension, in the family, a lot of tension in your life. How did you kind of navigate that in those early years?
Yeah, look, it was tough. And there was some other dynamics that were really difficult. You couldn't, you weren't allowed to feel things. You weren't allowed to have emotions. If bad things happened to you and you tried to tell someone, well, then you were lying and you would be punished again. Right. And so you can imagine it was difficult because as a child, I really isolated myself. I had to survive. I would spend a lot of time on my own, just outside playing quietly and trying to stay out of trouble and out of people's way. And so growing up was lonely. We also lived in a pretty remote area until I was probably around 8 years old. And the one saving grace for me was that I was really good at school. So for some reason, God made me smart. I was able to read before I could remember, and I could escape into books and into learning. And at school, I did well, and I made it my business to do really well, which in the end opened doors that were unusual for someone from my background. So for that, I was grateful. And I do, I see the gift of education that I had early in my life as the beginning of God's rescue and redemption plan for me, because it allowed me to grow and go places I otherwise probably wouldn't have had the chance to go.
Yes. We'll be speaking about your worldwide career in a moment, and the great places you went to school for your university education. An interesting comment you made there. It was safer to be alone as a child, and recognizing that and just going off and being alone. And then your drive became your education. So I'm going to step out of chronology here because I know you have a couple of children yourself. How has that experience impacted your parenting?
Wow. Right to the core. So my husband and I, we both married the second time around. Neither of us had children from our first marriages. And when we met each other, it was a whole beautiful story. And we knew that we wanted to have children. In fact, I had always known that I wanted to be a mom. I remember saying to him, and we agreed, that if we were blessed with children, we would do everything in our power to ensure that the childhood our children experienced was night and day from our own experience. And that wasn't just about what they have, the blessings of material things and toys and fun, but actually how they are raised. We were very, very focused on our children need to know they're loved and fully accepted. And our job as parents is to bring out of them what God has placed in them, rather than squashing them into being what we think they should be. And I will tell you that becoming a parent, it was the most incredible experience for me, because it was an answer to a very, very, very deep prayer and desire of my heart. But it was also really, really discombobulating as well, because when you become a parent, and you are, I'm sure as many parents know, you are in a moment of their birth, and then over the years, the love that comes out of you for these little human beings, even when they're driving you crazy, the love that you have for them, the lessons that you learn from them. I had to face again in a very, very profound way the question of, well, if this is my experience as a parent, why does it seem that my parents didn't feel this way about me? And what was that about? And that was actually very, very, very hard. I felt something in me, particularly when my second child, Max, was born. I remember being pregnant with him and crying every single night for hours, and identifying that later as grief. And it was grieving the childhood I had never had, grieving the relationship I had so desperately wanted with my parents that I never had. And understanding as a mom what I hope any parent would want to feel for their children. It's been a very healing experience.
Wow. And as we'll look at your chronology, a very pivotal point in your relationship with Christ, letting go of that past. Not, I think the appropriate phrase is you were a bridge generation or a transitional generation, not mimicking and copying the past, but creating a new future from that past.
Yeah. And I think also having, I should have said this, of course, but through the eyes of a parent, you understand God the Father, because you know that, or I learned and really appreciated, he loves me far more than I could ever love my children. He just can, because he's perfect. God is love, and he's perfect in his love. And that is overwhelming, because I know how much I love my children.
Right.
I would die for my children.
Mm-hmm.
And you come near, I mean, you can say all sorts of things to me, but you say something to my child.
You're in trouble.
Yeah. But knowing that God loves me and them even more than that, that is hard to comprehend. It's incredible that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're going completely off script, because that was a great comment that I could talk about for 45 minutes at least.
There are books on that topic.
Yes, yes. So what are the age of your children?
Amalia is 9, nearly 10. Sometimes it feels like 19. And
Right.
Max
Right.
is 8.
So let's go back. I envision you in England running through the beautiful meadows and glens by yourself, because it's a safe place. Take a great book with you, probably Tolkien or maybe C.S. Lewis, great English guys, and you're reading and enjoying that, and you start your education, and you get to university. You've had this hard childhood. You've got an angry God. What are the first few steps from angry God to the relationship you have today as you went through university?
Yeah. So when I got to university, I think my parents drove me. We arrived on a Saturday morning, and Sunday morning, the next day, I joined a large, vibrant student church, which was just fantastic. It was very, very different to the kinds of churches I'd been in as a child. Once we were out of a more closed environment and able to go to church. And this was fantastic. I mean, for the first time, the worship was vibrant. I was listening to very exciting sermons and teaching, where I heard about not just the truth of the gospel, which I already knew, but I heard about a God who wanted to be in a relationship with me. I heard about a life where I could grow and be discipled in my relationship with him and experience joy, hope, freedom, peace. And these were emotions and experiences that were just beyond my comprehension at this time. I couldn't even really understand what a joyful life would look like. So here was this very different Jesus. And to be honest, I was hungry for it. I was desperate for it. So even though, the first university, as most people know, it's an intense melting pot. You experiment with all sorts of things. I experimented with all sorts of things too that were not necessarily wise or good choices.
You survived.
I survived. And through university, I grew closer to Jesus. I mean, not as close as I am today, but it was the beginning of that journey. And I distinctly remember just as we were going into the final year of university, I went to a Christian Union retreat in the north of England. It was a beautiful location. And one day he and I just went for a walk, and I ended up sitting in this woodland, in this glade, and there was this log, and I sat down on the log and I prayed. I really talked to him, but in a very free way for the first time. And that was when, for the first time, I started to speak with tongues. And I experienced his love pouring over me. It was this, I had this vision of this golden waterfall falling from heaven onto my head, and just this sense of peace just permeating through me, and his love. And that was really, that was a life-changing moment, because prior to that, Jesus, God, Holy Spirit were in books or words. Now I experienced him. I actually felt his presence. And I go back, for many years thereafter, if I had doubt, I would go back to that moment and know that he was real, because in that moment, I was with him. I felt him. I experienced him in a tangible way, and there was no denying it. It was impossible to walk away unchanged from that moment. So that was really the beginning of probably, 10, 15 years of starting to really understand who he was and what he wanted from me.
Had to be such an exciting moment to go from that angry God to a real Christ, who is loving, unbelievable. And the thing that I appreciate is, those who have listened to the podcast, every podcast, there's been a similar type of experience where Christ reveals himself because of your, searching for him. And you used the phrase relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit. What does that mean? How do you have a relationship with something that's spiritual?
So Jesus, God, and Holy Spirit, they are one, and they are spiritual, but they're also real. And Jesus is a person, and he talks to me, and I talk with him a million times a day in many different ways, through prayer, through reading his word, through other people, through nature. I hear him audibly. I have dreams and visions, and I've spent time intentionally practicing how to hear him more, which often means talk less, listen more.
Right.
But he's as real to me as my husband is real to me, as my children are real to me, as my friends are real to me, and it's incredible. It's and the sense of just knowing that he's here for me every single day, every single moment of every day, every conversation I'm in, every situation I have to navigate, every challenge, every joy. My first thought is, so how are we going? What do you want me to say in this situation, Jesus? How do you want me to handle this situation? A message for somebody in this room. What do you want me to do? That is a really, it's a very, very deep thing.
I heard a couple of themes that are very interesting there. Communication, talking, which builds a relationship. Experience, you experience a person, they do things for you, you do things for them, and they become a friend. And then, the wisdom of the scriptures and the Holy Spirit helping with that. So I really like what you said, because it puts some meat on the bone about how do you build any relationship. And then this spiritual relationship being more real because it's with God and with Christ. So that actually makes sense. Thank you for sharing it that way. Emma and Christ grow close together through her university experience, only to see the energy of the relationship fade during her first marriage. As you can see from Emma's life chart, her life experience takes a big dip after college, and as she will tell us in a moment, starts to build back during her 4-year stint in Sydney. Meanwhile, her relationship with Christ reaches a high in college, fades in her first marriage, and comes roaring back as she invites God to work on her heart. Emma now continues her story as she leaves university and starts her career. So you finish university because of your love of education, you're achieving academically at a high level. You're going now to get great offers and scholarships for law school. Your career starts taking off. What's going on personally during these days?
Yeah, so immediately after university, I married. That was, with hindsight, probably a really bad idea. I was looking for something in that relationship that I think was missing from an earlier time in my life, and it was not an easy relationship to be in. And for years, I fought hard to not only excel at work and be a good employee, a great attorney, but also to keep the veneer on this marriage that I wanted to appear perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really challenging time. Now, my relationship, it was interesting because I was starting to go deeper with God. I was starting to go deeper with Jesus. I was starting to address for the first time areas of wounding and pain and trauma from my childhood, and really having to ask him to help heal those areas. And at the same time, there was this in the background, this rising, first it was very subconscious, but this rising awareness that other parts of my life needed attention too.
Mm-hmm.
And it all kind of came to a head in my early 30s, where I realized I just can't go on living like this. I mean, the pressure I had put on myself, I think, was really intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being on my knees many times. I had to go to Paris for a business trip, and I sat. I was early for my train back to London, and I sat at the train station with a coffee. And I don't know, I think this was the first time this had ever happened, but God, I just felt him present in that strange coffee shop area.
Yeah.
And I knew he was saying, you need to look at your marriage. You need to look at it. You need to look at, and I knew that if I didn't do something, I probably wasn't going to survive. I probably wasn't going to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was going to be the death of me. So that was the beginning of 9 months of really having to face up to that reality and make some very difficult decisions. And I went into marriage believing it was for life. It was absolutely for life. These were solemn vows before God. So coming to a place where I could admit before him that this appears to have been a horrible mistake that I am responsible for. And I don't think I can survive if I carry on. That was a challenging time, because I asked for advice. I talked with my vicar. I read the Bible. I talked with wise counselors, and some people gave me the advice that I think that often people are given in that situation, which is you have to stay and make it work. But I also, by this time, I knew I had a relationship with God and Jesus, and I didn't feel that big stick. I didn't feel that the answer was, if you leave, I will beat you. I felt much more, I love you. This is not how life is supposed to be. And this is not an easy decision. But there is grace whether you stay and grace whether you go. My love for you can conquer any decision you make. So I did leave. And about a few weeks later, I went to Australia. I actually accepted a job in-house as a regional general counsel. And on the flight out there, I had a lot of time to reflect. You know, you're up 40,000 feet. I had only 2 suitcases of possessions in the world. And somewhere after we transited through Singapore on the last leg into Sydney, I was praying, and I remember really clearly saying, God, I am sorry for all of the mess, and I'm sorry for all of the chaos, and I'm sorry for all of my mistakes. And I do believe, although I don't know that I feel it, I do believe that your love and what you did at the cross can cover all of it. But I want to change. I want to be who you made me to be. And I want to live a life that is honoring for you. And I prayed the most dangerous part. I remember this really clearly, saying, Father, whatever you need to do, whatever you need to heal or break or shine a light on in my life, I want you to do it, because I do not want to be this person anymore. I want to, in particular, I don't want to ever be in another relationship until I am ready to honor you in that relationship. But I do not want to be this version of me. I want to be who you made me to be. And that was, as I say, a very dangerous prayer, because
Yes.
the next 4 years in Australia, he broke me. He broke me apart. Every part of my life. I had to deal with some really dark. I had to deal with a lot of pain and healing. I had to do, there were a lot of things that had been done to me that I had to address, but there was a lot I had done to myself and a lot of darkness. And I had to go deep and ask the hard questions about ugly things that were my responsibility and face them with him and change dramatically as a person. And I know to this day, if I had not been willing to do that work, I would have been a very ugly person in many ways when I left Australia. As it happens, I was, by his grace, I faced up to who I was becoming and we addressed it together.
The symbolism in what you just said is absolutely amazing. So let me just walk through it for a moment, because it just shows the immense growth that you were undergoing in your relationship with God and with Christ. So there's this 8-year-old in the meadow escaping to loneliness for protection. Then there's this university graduate going to law school, starting to achieve a great career, who's still wanting things that you don't have emotionally and in relationship. And you reach out to this guy, which, many of us have done, right? Just I'm going to extract from you to make me better, and then coming to the point where you say, okay, big mistake. This is not intending to, not what I wanted. Then the echoes of God's going to punish me. He's going to be angry because, marriage is for life. I'm going to divorce. And then you saying God's grace, I'm confident in your love and relationship, Father, that whether I stay in this relationship or I leave this relationship, you are with me. And the confidence of that moment of saying, you are with me. We're going to rip the veneer off of my personal life, show the contrast with my career. And then I'm getting out of town, not only out of town, but out of country, halfway around the world.
Yeah.
And at 40,000 feet, somewhere above Singapore, which I've been. It's a very spiritual, thoughtful place to be at 40,000 feet on the other side of the world.
Yeah, if you're going to be anywhere praying, Singapore is a good place to do it.
Yes. And so you're off and you're praying and you're going to be alone again. But this time you're not escaping. Yeah. And with your relationship with God, you can actually say, I have the desire and a little bit of confidence that I want to be alone with you, and let's work on me.
Yeah.
And that's a profound place to be. And just your confidence in God and the brokenness that happened. Meanwhile, in your career, you're getting exceeding expectations.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, again, it was kind of the pattern that every time my personal life felt like it was at the absolute worst bottom it could possibly get to, there would be a promotion in my professional life, and it was crazy weird.
Yes.
But that was God's grace, because I had to provide for myself. I had to be able to do that, and I could through that.
Yeah. So describe month 1, year 1, Sydney.
Oh, wow.
To month 12, year 4 in Sydney. What changed in Emma?
Oh, everything. Absolutely everything. I remember walking again into church. I didn't know.
Stop right there. That's incredible. You did it again.
Yeah.
You've gone through 3 transitions now where you went back into a church, that in itself is phenomenal. At the university, after the divorce, now you're in Australia by yourself, and you do this thing, you walk into church. Go ahead. I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, no, it was it never crossed my mind that I wouldn't, obviously. And I walked into, it was funny, the church at the time was it was one of the Christian City Church plants, and they were meeting of all places in a kind of a sports center. So it was a little unusual, but I found my community there the moment I walked through the door. Now, I wasn't a very likable person, I'm pretty sure, at that point, but they absolutely put their arms around me. And I think it was, I thought I presented as put together. I think it was probably, with hindsight, very clear I wasn't. And as an example of that, for 6 months, one of the things I'd always enjoyed in life was singing and music. And I literally came off the flight in Sydney with a really nasty throat infection. For 6 months, I couldn't sing, I couldn't worship, I couldn't do any of that. I could just stand there and feel it on the inside. I think that was a bit of a metaphor for life and where I was as well. But I had been suicidal around that time. I was very, very depressed. I had nothing, absolutely no possessions. In fact, I had debts left over from the marriage. And everybody I knew or who said that they loved me was on the other side of the world, as you point out. Mm-hmm. The day I left Sydney, which was a really tough decision, and it was following through again in obedience to God. It was the second time I heard him audibly, was when he told me I would be leaving Sydney. And that was a very, took me some time to come to terms with that. Yeah. But the person who got on the flight from Sydney to Dubai had been put back together. She had grown in her relationship with Christ, not just in the actual relationship piece, but I, worked hard to read a lot and learn a lot and absorb a lot of teaching and understand much more about what a discipled life would look like. I had phenomenal friends, really, really wonderful relationships that continue to this day, of just beautiful people who, one of the hardest things is when your best friends are sort of on the other side of the world. Wow. And I was moving on again in my career, but most of all, he had begun, it wasn't complete, I realize now, I thought so at the time, but he had really healed me to a place where I could stand on my own 2 feet and breathe in and out and function much more aligned with the person he made me to be. He had humbled me. He had cut some rot out. There were areas of sin that were no longer issues. There were still things to work on, for sure, but the person who arrived in Dubai was much more the person you see today. And it was an act of faith, because I was really asking him. I mean, I was coming up into my mid-late 30s at this point, and I didn't know, there were some big questions, am I going to get married again? Maybe I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. And if I am, what am I going to do to serve you? And so there were some big questions that he and I had ahead of us to answer. But I was pretty unrecognizable from the person who got on that flight on that dark October day 4 years earlier.
That's fascinating. So you go to Dubai, just a little place on the other side of the world.
From here, I think it is.
Yes. From Australia to Dubai. Yeah, I guess that's only a quarter or third of the way around. So you're there, new company, new relationships, new responsibilities, but it's the new Emma. Yeah. I'm sure there's a spiritual confidence now. Describe how comfortable you are with yourself in Dubai.
Yeah, Dubai, when I arrived, Dubai is not an easy place for a single professional white woman, Christian, to turn up. But, I navigated those early weeks pretty well. There's a lot of administration, visas, finding a place to live, navigating the culture, finding a church, and all of that. I felt God, eased me through pretty well, even with some laughter, which is not something you often hear when you've been sat in the Dubai's equivalent of the DMV for half a day trying to get a visa, a driving license. But no, that was really a good time. And I stepped into a role that required me to travel around the region. And, pretty soon after I got there, I had been told during the interview process that this was a long-term role and it was going to be awesome. Well, a few weeks in, we discovered the company was actually being sold, which was like, well, okay, well, that was a bit of a con job. But 6 months in, I met the man who eventually became my husband. And it was so wonderful how we got to know each other and realized that our stories were actually very similar. Mm-hmm. And I think we understood each other in a way I certainly know I felt he understood me in a way no one else had ever been able to understand me. And once we became friends, after that, it was a pretty whirlwind romance, and we were married within 9 months of actually physically meeting each other, and went on to have our children while we were there. What happened, which was really unexpected, was I moved to work for a company 11 years ago which was in a lot of trouble. Now, up until this point, everything in my career had kind of been law and compliance and ethics and investigations and anything, pretty broad general counsel legal roles. Mm-hmm. This company was in trouble, big trouble with the US government. And for anyone who's listening who has dealt with the Department of Justice, it is, they know how serious that is. And this was no small amount of trouble. They were one of the largest contractors in Afghanistan, serving the US and NATO forces, and they'd made some mistakes, some pretty serious mistakes. Yeah. And I was hired to come in, and I think the role even had to be approved my hiring had to be approved by their council in Washington, DC. I was basically brought in to sort out a chunk of the mess. Mm-hmm. And try and get them into a shape where they could continue to responsibly do what they were doing. Yeah. And that was, it was one of those roles where a lot of people said to me, why would you want to go and work for them? That's going to be bad for your resume. That's going to be bad for your reputation. And all I could say is, listen, they're in trouble. And it's pretty clear I'm not the reason for the trouble. Right. And
you didn't create the trouble.
I didn't create the trouble. And what I do really well is fix messes. I mean, that's what I love doing. And I said, they need me. They need what I bring. And so actually that role, not only was it one of the most enjoyable I've had in terms of what I was actually doing. I mean, I got to do things and go to places that you would never get to go to in any other situation. And I visited parts of Afghanistan. I got to fly on cargo planes. I sat inside rotary wings and had Taliban fire across our windshield, and went into parts of Africa that are closed to other people. And it was incredible experience. And I actually worked with some really good people who were very grateful for what we were doing. And from a career point of view, it was a real high point, because I was tasked with doing things that you might normally, first of all, you might never get to do. Right. But many people would expect you to be in, much more towards the end of your career to be able to take them on. Mm-hmm. I regard it as one of the greatest privileges God gave me. One of the greatest responsibilities he gave me was that job. And when my husband and I, with 2 small children, decided that we really did need to come back to the USA, make that our home base, and not live in the Middle East anymore, I came here. I closed out the legal issues with the Department of Justice, and that was a whole story in itself. Mm-hmm. And then that was because of some of those legal issues, the opportunity presented itself to participate in the management buyout, raise private equity funding on Wall Street, and actually launch the company that became Valiant. And while none of that was easy, it's probably been the most intense 11 years that you can possibly imagine. It is not lost on me that has been an immense privilege to be involved in all of that. And God's goodness to me is paramount throughout, because I saw his miraculous hand in the marketplace. I saw him do things at Supreme and in the standing up of Valiant that people said, literally, people were like, that cannot happen. That will not happen. That has never been done before. The US government don't operate that way. They will not allow it to be so. And every time we hit a wall, every time we hit a mountain that needed to be climbed, and all of the naysayers around us were saying, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I remember getting on my knees and having this profound sense of God saying, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make it happen. And I said, God, well, let it be so. Because right now, I think you're the only person that can make this happen. And time and again, we were able to break through these barriers to the point where on February the 3rd, 2017, Valiant was launched. And many people claim credit for many things about Valiant launching, and that's all valid. I believe absolutely at the depth of me that God launched Valiant. He allowed Valiant to launch because too many miracles were required. And to him, all the glory is due for what happened on that day. And it has been incredible, not just to see that, but to have this realization that the marketplace, business world, is God's kingdom too. He's got his finger right on that. I think.
No, it's not. It's not his kingdom.
I think he's going. I mean, I think for the longest time, we've made the mistake of thinking you go to church on Sunday and then you go to work on Monday.
Right.
And those two worlds do not coincide.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen something different. I have seen him really start to, really start to focus on the marketplace as someone that he wants to be, not just there. He wants to be at the center of the marketplace. And I have been seeing signs of revival. We're all praying for revival. We're praying for it in our society and in our culture. And I think we know that we need it very badly. But in the marketplace, I think you're starting to see signs of it. And that's super exciting.
Yes. So you've just raised all the ire of the cynics with this beautiful story. So let me just ask you a couple of questions along these lines. Why would God even care about Supreme and Valiant and your career and what decisions you were making? Why did he care? Why does he care?
Well, because I think he cares about people. I think he cares about all of us. I think he cares about every single human being on this planet. And I mean every single human being. Whatever we believe today, whatever religion we are today, whatever gender we profess, whatever company we work for, whatever we've done or not done, good or bad, he made us. He made us in his image. He made us to be in relationship with him, and he wants us to be in relationship with him. So why not the marketplace? Most people have to go to work. And so he's going to go where we are. And most of us aren't in church on Sunday. So he's going to go where we are. And I think it can be very offensive to people, and particularly legalistic people who think, I put on my best suit and I go to church on Sunday and this is where God is and he's exclusively for me. I think that's nonsense. I think he's exclusively for everyone. So, I can tell you when we were fighting, first of all, to resolve Supreme's issues and then to stand up Valiant, for me, right at the heart of it was we have customers that need us. Customers are people. And in our case, many of them were our serving armed forces. You do not want your troops unfed, unwatered, and without fuel. That's the very last thing you ever want. It was about the people working for those companies. And despite what people like to say, the vast majority of people working for Supreme were in no way involved in the bad behavior. They need jobs, they have families, they have responsibilities, and they have pride in what they were doing, and they were doing a good job. And then in standing up Valiant, it was about rescuing those assets, and rescuing the people and making sure the customers could continue to be served. So for me, the whole way through, God cares about the people that he created to be on this planet. And that was just an absolute example of that principle.
Well done. Yes. Thank you for saying that. That's well done. Yes and yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk a moment. So here you are in the United States. You were in the best career position that you could be in. Your personal life is flourishing. And then you decide to leave your career and start over as a founder and principal of a consulting group. Let's just make it hard again.
Well,
what was the confidence in doing that?
Well, it really was. So probably for the last 18 months, I've been asking God, seeking God, what's next? I had a sense just from the work I've been doing with my coach and with a Christian spiritual coach, that God had more for me to do beyond Valiant. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that would look like. And I've been praying and very actively seeking him in a number of different ways over the last 18 months, and just sitting quietly and participating in masterminds while we try and figure this out. And there've been days, the last 18 months haven't always been easy either, because when you want to get on with the rest of your life, I think it was when Harry Met Sally, he says, when you want to start the rest of your life, you want it to start right now. But you have to wait for God to say it's time. Well, in the summer, it was in August, we went on a family vacation and we had some time away, and I sensed something was coming. And then the first night home, again, it was probably one of 3 times in my life that this has happened. I was woken up very early in the morning and I just sensed the presence of God in the bedroom. It was palpable, like palpable. And I knew that don't try going back to sleep. That's not happening. So I got up, went and knelt around the corner so I didn't disturb Anurag. And I heard God say, I heard an audible voice. He said, Emma, it's time for you to leave Valiant. And so, long story short, I spoke with our CEO. I spoke with an advisor who works with our board when these kind of decisions have to be made. And I told them what happened. I didn't edit. I told them. And I said, it's time for me to leave. And, actually, the interesting thing is, had I left any earlier, which I had a human desire to do at various points, it wouldn't have been the right timing. But the last few weeks were very easy. And I think we were able, not fractious or contentious or awful in any way. It was a really sweet time. And now I'm moving on to new things. And, God he's given me parts of the picture. And so I'm starting to pull on the threads of the parts of the picture that he has shown me. And they're starting to get some clarity around what I'm going to be doing and who I'm going to be doing it with. And it's exciting and cool. Yes. But I think he's he just has more for me to be doing with other folks. And I'm excited about that. At the end of the day, I'm reading Bill Johnson's new book, Open Heavens. And in it, he meets one of the big mega church pastors out in Asia. And he says, what's the secret to your success? And I wish I could remember the pastor's name. And he says, it's really just, I pray and I obey. And I feel that this is one of those moments where I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and God spoke. And now I'm just going to obey and see where he takes me next. But I'm kind of ready. I'm ready now.
So an interesting contrast to the prayer over Singapore. The prayer over Singapore changed me, do what you need to do to me, right?
Yeah.
And now the prayer is, what do you want? What's next for me with you? And the growth between those 2 points. Go ahead.
Well, I think that's really right. I mean, I now really understand that I'm here for a purpose, and it's his purposes. And it really is. I look out at the world and all of the issues that are out there. And I mean, it's what are we going to do together, God? Where are we off to? What big challenges are we going to solve together and with other people? Like, I'm actually really excited, like super excited. And I know it's not going to be easy. I know there are going to be some big battles ahead, but I also know that he's taken everything, every little detail of my life to date, every great bit, but every tough bit. And he has prepared me to work with him and be alongside him in partnership with him for this next chapter, and that nothing is wasted. He can turn what people meant for harm, he can use for our good. And I feel now that I'm putting on his armor afresh. And we're headed out. I had a picture yesterday, actually, of the two of us standing in front of a large army. I was dressed in warrior clothing, and we were looking out. I couldn't see what the enemy was, but I knew it was out there. But a sense of strength and joy at being alongside him in the battle and battling together. So we'll see what he wants to do.
Yes. Your thoughts have been profound today, and I really appreciate them. I appreciate you taking us through the journey of where you and Christ have gone and what it's meant in your life. And just so great to see you at this spot. What a beautiful spot to be.
No, it's such a privilege and an honor. And I know many of us in life go through some really dark, tough times, but there's hope. There's hope if you draw near to him and go deep with him. You can be standing in a very different place, and he will take all of your past, whatever it looks like. And mine certainly has been very ugly in places, but he can take all of that and he can redeem it for his purposes, and he can redeem you for his glory. And I don't just believe that, I know that to be true. And I know that it's not just for me, it's for everybody.
And I know both of us wish that for everybody who's listening.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma. It's been wonderful. And we'll be watching what happens with Swallowtail.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Gene. It's been a great conversation.
Yes, likewise. What I appreciate most about Emma's comments include the love and comfort Christ wants to inject into our lives. And number two, God cares about what I do at work every day and actively supports me in that work. Peace.